as we go through today's show, like we often do, we've tried to observe and interpret a theme, if you will. And one of the things that we keep seeing crop up is this notion of secrets. Secrets, in many ways, are a tool of the bad guys. You can interpret bad guys in lots of different ways, but I think you'll see what we mean as we go through today's discussions. So, one of the things that came out in the last few days is a notification of an interim report regarding First Liberty Financial's seizure, if you will, by the SEC and the investigation being conducted into their what the SEC and others are calling a Ponzi scheme of now over, it appears, $140 million and across many states and many individuals. We give a lot of credit to the receiver, Mr. Hayes, Gregory Hayes, who is conducting this. And he goes into some real level of depth to try to give visibility to what they've gone through so far and what they are pursuing now to be able to recover funds, first on behalf of those who may have been unduly harmed in this Ponzi scheme, and two, to really go after the folks that should be returning money. And he talks about the dynamic that appears that some of these people are trying to avoid that. So we find this very interesting. We're going to give you, as we go through this, we're going to go through some level of depth. And we're also going to give you a website where you can look and find the same pieces of information for yourself. You can download the entire report and review it if you wish. There's 62 pages to this report, so it is in quite good level of depth. And there's many things he talks about that are, I'll call them surprising, and are indicative of what we started the show with. There are secrets in here that I think we're going to be, in some cases, surprised, in other cases, maybe shocked. So one of the things he talks about is the amount of money sitting in bank accounts of what he's calling the receivership entities. Those are First Liberty, a building and loan, and its associated companies. You remember there were about 4 or 5 of them, and they're all spoken of in terms of receivership entities. And also he talks about the liquidation of certain assets that have been analyzed, evaluated, and they're trying to initiate, in some cases, collection efforts with regard to the loans made by these receivership entities. He goes on, the primary asset of the receivership consists of approximately 60 individual defaulted loans. 60. In some cases, individual borrowers hold several loans in their or affiliate names. Remember that, because we're going to talk about that in just a couple of minutes. And he goes on to explain that the receiver, Mr. Hayes, has spent most of his efforts to date on working to untangle and administer the loans. Why would they need to be untangled? Well, he goes on later to talk about the level of bookkeeping and organization with regard to what was going on inside First Liberty. And we'll wait to use his characterization for that. He goes on in this paragraph, despite First Liberty stating to investors they never had a defaulted loan, not a single loan held by the receiver is current on payments, and loans themselves are either matured or in default. Not a single loan. Can you imagine? And yet the statements to prospective investors in many cases included a statement about, we've never had a defaulted loan. He continues, such loans involve various borrowers and parties who entered loan participation agreements and investor notes, proceeds co-mingled in and out of a common pool. So while many investors were told that they might be investing in a particular project or a particular type of loan or a particular type of loan for a given entity, it turns out that much of this appears to have been commingled out of a common pool, which of course makes the current situation and what happened potentially much more difficult to uncover and discern. He goes on, certain parties who receive transfers from the common pool containing funds of investors to which such parties may not have been entitled, meaning some of this money may have gone to parties who weren't entitled to it. It begins to get very concerning, even more so than the scheme itself when they first announced it. Now it appears that the ability to even discern what's happened, where money came from, where it went, to whom it went, and what the current status is convoluted by this mix and commingling potentially of fund transfers. During the application period, the receiver also discovered that significant transfers of funds and other assets were made to third parties, insiders, and affiliates of the receivership entities who did not appear to have provided equivalent value to the receivership entities, and or who may have facilitated the misconduct and contributed to the investor losses. Who is he referring to as insiders? He doesn't specify yet. Now, could this be potentially other members, other people within First Liberty? Potentially. Could it be potentially even family members? We don't know. Could it be outside parties? He says, made to third parties, investors. How many people are wrapped up in this, and how many have yet to really be named? Interestingly enough, later in this document, we're not going to read you the whole thing because it's quite long, but we're going to show you a few things that begin to name some of the people involved in this, and it gets troubling. Okay, he goes on to begin describing his investigations and so forth. Most notably, we pulled out this quote: based on the review of the computers of the receivership entities and interviews of its administrator and other employees, the receiver confirmed that the receivership entities did not properly manage their finances or business operations or maintain in financial records, their financial records, in a readily usable manner. Didn't properly maintain finances or business operations in a readily usable manner. It sounds like it is a disaster in terms of bookkeeping inside First Liberty. Before I move on, down at the bottom of that page, you will see a website, www.firstlibertyreceivership.com. This is a website that has been created by the receiver, Mr. Hayes, and his affiliates to provide visibility to the public, to other potential victims, and other interested third parties so that they may see the substance, the status, if you will. I just noticed I have a typo in that, but should read www.firstlibertyreceivership.com. I think I'm missing an R and an E there in the middle of the word. But look that up. It is noted in the document itself, and you'll be able to download the entire document. You'll be able to see other court filings and other information that they are making available to the public. Again, trying to make this as legally transparent as they can, because so many people, one, have been victims of this, and two, are interested in its progress. This is very interesting. Immediately upon his appointment, the receiver discovered that the receivership entities, again, this group of companies associated with First Liberty, had several highly compensated employees on its payroll. Payroll costs were approximately $120,000 per month, and the entire staff of 9 employees had been terminated prior to his appointment, meaning the appointment of the receiver. After taking control of the records and of the Noonan office, the receiver elected not to re-employ any of these individuals. So $120,000 a month sounded kind of significant to me. So just by doing a quick piece of math, we don't know who the specific individuals are. We don't know if there were differences in what they were being paid. But on average, that means that those 9 employees were being paid, on average, $13,000 and change per month per employee. $13,000 per month. I don't know our listeners feel about that, but $13,000 a month is a pretty good size number. Okay. Now this becomes even darker. To date, only one borrower has made payments totaling $45,000 to the receiver. Only one borrower. Remember, there were 60 defaulted loans. While most of the loans have been in default for a long time, the receiver's impression is frankly that many of the borrowers are using the receivership, meaning using the status of First Liberty under this receivership as a basis to contest their loans and to avoid their responsibilities to repay those loans. Investors should be assured that the receiver intends to enforce each loan to the fullest extent possible and default interest is accruing. The most important thing to see here is that many of the borrowers are using the receivership as a basis to try not to pay back these loans. That's the net of it. Okay. This now becomes quite interesting because he begins to name some of the entities that are involved in this. And again, we were only going to pull out a few of the pages of the 60-page report, but you'll see why we're focused on some of these in just a moment. The progress of the receiver has been hindered by attempts by certain investors to interfere with the administration of the bridge loans. By certain investors to interfere with the administration of the bridge loans. For example, Baypoint Capital Partners, an investor in a portion of 3 of the loans, and they make mention of those, is seeking to intervene in this case for the purpose of removing 3 bridge loans from the receivership and assuming the administration and enforcement of minority shares of those loans, meaning they're trying to take responsibility for recapturing this money away from the receiver. Why would somebody do that in the midst of a Ponzi scheme investigation? What's behind there? Here is a quick view of Baypoint Capital Partners. Folks are happy to go in here, and you can find this on the Secretary of State's business search website. You're welcome to look into this, and I know that we have many listeners who do their own investigation, so this might be an appropriate starting point. This is a foreign limited partnership, meaning it does not rest in Georgia. It is actually, in part, I believe it's in Florida, if I recall correctly, but there are a number of these loans that are in fact not in Georgia. The companies involved may not be in Georgia. All right, now things get very interesting. One of the other firms that he pulls out is this, Curepoint LLC, and he names some of the principals. First principal named is one Daniel Dooley. That name should ring familiar to many people. He also calls out Philip Miles, Mark Miles, and Physician Financial Partners, LLC. He talks about Curepoint entered loans dated November 1st, 2019 for $3.65 million. In November 22nd, 2019 in the amount of $900,000. May 20th, 21 in the amount of $1.5 million. September 30th in 21 in the amount of $400,000. If you add those up, the number associated with this firm, according to my math, comes up to $6.45 million. Again, look at the names involved. Daniel Dooley. Where do we remember Daniel Dooley's name from? Well, Daniel Dooley, as of this report, we are hearing is the Daniel Dooley associated with Derek Dooley, the current Senate candidate, and a friend of Governor Kemp. In fact, he was reported to be a roommate, and we checked that, of Governor Kemp back during their college days. So how does that relate, and how do you make sense of what the receiver says here, which is, these firms are trying to seemingly stand in the way of getting these loans paid back. This is an announcement that Kemp reappointed Daniel Dooley to the Lake Lanier Islands Development Authority just earlier this year, May of 2025. There's Derek Dooley, current Senate candidate, again, backed by Kemp and announced by Kemp as what he thought was the most appropriate Senate candidate. Yet we've reported extensively in the past that Derek Dooley has he's failed to register as a Republican. It appears that he's failed to vote. Appears that he failed to support Trump. He's been a relative, blank on the political landscape. Has resided in several different states as he was attempting to coach certain football teams in college and so forth. And there's his brother, Daniel Dooley, who apparently has ties to First Liberty. And then here is Daniel Dooley, founder of Centigex, I believe is how you pronounce it. Could be getting that wrong. And I asked one of the AI engines, Grok in this case, to confirm whether Daniel Dooley has been noted as a roommate of Brian Kemp. And indeed, it came back and said, yeah, he was a roommate of Kemp back in college at the University of Georgia. And the family ties between the Dooley family and the Kemp family are noted as well. So this appears more than very interesting. And we're not sure where this is going to go. But again, the connection is what matters. And how many times in the past have we said, look at the connections that people have, and you will learn more about who they are, who they're working with, what they may be involved with. There is also this. He mentions Philip Miles, which is one of the gentlemen listed in that previous page. And again, there's another loan here in December of 22 in the amount of $6.5 million, which had an original maturity date of December 18th, 2023. So again, we begin to see similar names pop up. These people are they part of a family, these Miles family? Well, we don't know yet. We are just hours into looking at some of these things, but we note too that this is supposed to be a cancer care center of some kind that was acquiring this loan. Now comes a very interesting name, Haven and Lisa Brown. Now, Lisa Brown, I'm going to read this. Lisa Brown is the manager of Haven Real Estate Holdings of Snellville, which entered a loan dated July 31st, 2024 in the amount of $1.75 million and had a maturity date of July 31st, 2025, and was secured by all assets of the borrower, a senior living facility in Snellville, and a guarantee by Lisa Brown and Haven Memory Care of Snellville. Again, sort of an ancillary, we'll call it, medical or care facility. Most notably, a few paragraphs later, he says this, the receiver writes this: to date, Ms. Brown, who has personally guaranteed all of these loans, has been wholly uncooperative. She has refused to provide financial and other information and failed to make loan payments. And he goes on with further detail. But most importantly, look at that word, wholly uncooperative. Imagine what you feel when you read that and you are a victim of this enterprise. Wholly uncooperative. Okay, so that's where we stand as of the moment. Now, there's 62 pages. There is more information in here that we have yet to dig down underneath. But we suspect people across Georgia, now that we've voiced this, are going to be looking just as deeply as we are at what this all means. Who are these players? Why do we have these interesting connections with Daniel Dooley and several people named Miles? Why are some of these people attempting to get out from under the work of the receiver? And why are they fighting to keep this away from the power of the receivership when we know there are hundreds of victims across Georgia and maybe beyond who have lost millions upon millions. Some have lost everything.
So this is essentially the borrowers who are refusing to pay back, trying to use the receivership to not pay back the loans, correct?
That's true. That's true for the borrowers. There's also one investor that seems to be trying to extract himself from certain loans that they funded to get them out from under the receivership as well. So it's mainly borrowers, but it's also for whatever reason, one of these investor groups is trying to get out from under this as well. Why would they do that? Wouldn't they want the help of the FBI and the SEC and the receiver and others to recover their funds? And apparently they're trying to get away from this. Why? Why is the question.
Great research, Bill.
Well, again, this is part and parcel of folks, others that began looking at this. We saw some very pointed quotes from many folks, including work by David Cross and others. And that got us started. And then now we've gone a bit deeper, and we think that this rabbit hole is going to go a lot deeper than this. You can just smell it coming.
Wow. It's amazing. It's amazing. There's a lot of not just disclosure, but peeling back the onions, right?
Yep. Well, and now compare this to the efforts made by Joshua McKoon during the latest state committee meeting to avoid even discussion of the Frost family members still being in positions of leadership in the Georgia GOP. Made sure that the meeting was closed prior to being able to even bring up motions to potentially remove these people, or at least put them on notice for removal from their positions within the Georgia GOP. Why would someone do that? And now that we see this going on, again, with connections back through apparently Daniel Dooley, who's connected back to Kemp. Who is Kemp connected to? Joshua McKoon. So what role he plays in all of this, we have no idea yet. But the connections cannot be ignored.